Welcome to the Rare Earth Exchanges podcast, where power, politics, and the world's most coveted materials collide. Rare earth elements power the backbone of tomorrow's most critical technologies. With China dominating global production, the U.S. and its allies must align strategically to ensure a stable future. This urgency prompted tech entrepreneurs Daniel O'Connor and Dustin Olson to launch Rare Earth Exchanges, a news and insight platform built to equip stakeholders and decision makers with the tools and intelligence needed to reduce dependency and build prosperous resilience. Let's get into it.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Rare Earth Exchanges podcast. You've got me, as always, and you've got Daniel here. We're talking about the news this week and some pretty crazy stuff that's going on. There's quite a bit of movement. But first, last week we had a podcast with a company called Gasberry and their VP of marketing and sales over there, Callan Fitch. They are in the business of magnet presses, right? So they have presses that pack all the powder and everything together. Daniel, what did you think of that conversation?
I thought it was great. I mean, they're really gearing up to scale out production. I think Callan, he had a great attitude. They're ready to embrace R&D. I think that they could benefit from, a discussion with some of the government agencies that are trying to support the ex-China market here in the United States. So I'm hoping that various agencies, Department of Defense, Energy, whoever's involved, that they consider some of the suppliers and the value chain within even magnet production. And, because there's groups that want to do R&D, they may not have the margin to just set up a whole research and development lab, but they're willing to contribute. So the hope is that we can give them some attention from the federal government.
Absolutely. So they're a private company. And they sound like they're poised to just grow. As Callan said in our conversation, he's like, we make a lot of magnets. We want to make a whole lot more. So just the enthusiasm was really exciting. And so we're excited to see how they, as you're saying, fit into the supply chain and help all the other efforts going on from a domestic front. If you haven't listened to that episode, I highly encourage you to go back and listen to that and just get a sense for what Gasberry is doing. And they're another group out of Pennsylvania that's they just love and eat this stuff up, right? Which is because the second company we've talked to out of Pennsylvania, and
yes,
they're very talented. Callan said he's like, yeah, we talk about rocks and minerals around the dinner table because that's just all anyone does over there. So it's just.
Well, that part of Pennsylvania, sort of central west Pennsylvania, has a long mining and production history, and they're sort of rebuilding themselves as the United States reindustrializes. They're a nodal point that has, or a cluster of talent and knowledge that should be embraced and supported by the government, by industry, etc.
Absolutely, yeah. I hope they get it. I hope they get the attention they need, the business they need to really grow and help deliver what we all need. So that's awesome. So Daniel, let's talk about what's gone on in the world of rare earth in the last week or so. We were chatting before the call about some notable stock movement.
Yes.
And let's dive into that. I think a lot of our retail investors that listen to the show would probably really appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, for those following MP Materials, that stock has exploded. I mean, it's at $75.40 now, a market capitalization of $13.3 billion. It was just like 15 to 20 a month or two ago, right? So, yeah, I tend to be conservative, and when I see high multiples on revenue, especially in an industry like this, I'm typically very, very cautious. The only thing I would say is from different traditional investment measures, they start to look pretty expensive, and we've recommended. But our analysis is assuming that the rare earth supply chain is rebuilt in the United States. And thanks to the $400 million investment, the DoD has 15% interest in that company now. Another $1 billion in loan, or $1 billion plus in loans from JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. Another loan they just got for heavy rare earth we'll talk about.
I know.
they may go down a bit, but if they stop, if they plateau and then they go down a little bit, they're a buy because they're the lead. We've always said they're a treasure trove. They're the lead pony in this race in the ex-China market. And now, because of the deal that the DoD did, all these, we were talking to these different European companies. They're all looking over here now. They're seeing the money get spent over here.
Mm-hmm.
Europeans, they tend to be a little slower, a little more bureaucracy, right? So, typically I'd say, wow, this is an expensive stock. They're overvalued, but I don't know. I have a feeling that could go up higher. So I can't predict. If I could predict the future, I probably would be on a beach somewhere. But with that being said, it's pretty wild to watch. And it doesn't surprise me because this supply chain has to be rebuilt.
Mm-hmm.
So, but there's more pressure on them. And, I would say as an investor analyst, there's a lot of near perfect to perfect execution they must do now to meet the growing expectations. So be careful with what you wish for, right?
Yeah.
Similarly, Lynas Rare Earths is far more ahead of MP Materials in many ways. They're processing at commercial scale, still nothing compared to China, but they're at 1363, but $12.7 billion valuation. So the two lead players, right? If you go to our rankings for upstream, light rare earths, these two are the top non-Chinese companies. And, it's showing, okay? So now what we have to do is watch a whole bunch of these other companies that are right below them that are kind of developing the capacity to then go into the commercial process. And then and we know from one of the big investment banks that it's highly likely that more deals will be done with the U.S. government. We know multiple companies are talking to the U.S. government. So we spoke with one the other day. That was Pensana, right? Pensana spoke with them recently. They're partnered with ReElement over here in the United States. We've interviewed Mark Jensen. He's ready to take on any challenge. He's not afraid to take on a challenge. That's for sure. So it's fascinating to watch this stuff. China has to start, they're probably taking notice now. Okay. One thing about over here, Dustin, if the profit motive is apparent, if investors can make lots of money in the stock market, it can get crazy over here really quickly. And that's what's happening. So while China still controls 90% of all this stuff, we're starting to see the capital that can help start to chip away at that over time. But remember, without industrial policy, it can all fall apart.
Absolutely.
So we still don't have the industrial policy that we need to keep this thing going at the velocity it needs to. So we'll keep that pressure on. It's not about just spending a couple $1 billion, have a couple companies that can do something and walk away. That model will collapse. The Chinese will flood the market. There'll be a deal done with the American government. Then people will forget about it and say, well, I got my gains, and they'll sell. So you really need a level of industrial policy we have not had. Probably, it's more of a defense type of paradigm, where we're subsidizing integrated defense. We have to subsidize integrated critical mineral and rare earth supply chains, right? That's part of your national security.
So from a retail perspective, like there needs to be more opportunity. There needs, and we're going to see a frenzy of different types of investment opportunities. So outside of MP, are there others here in the United States that are worth taking a look at from your perspective, your opinion, of course, that they could consider?
Yeah, I mean, we recommend, again, what we're doing is we're ranking these companies both upstream, midstream, downstream. Remember, it's not just about mining. It's about refining. It's about magnets, right? So you have to have everything working together. So we have, on our rankings, both light rare earth and heavy rare earth, different assets that have potential. Okay. And so, we have to look at those, and our system, our algorithm is tracking, over time how they're proceeding. And then they may get one that does well, may get pushed up the rank, right? We know right now, this isn't a company, but under the heavy rare earths is the Myanmar rebels. So the Kachin Independent Army. They're number one on the heavy rare earth list. Right now, the Department of Defense is looking for heavy rare earths, and there's some different assets that are on our rankings, okay, that are non-China. Northern Minerals, they're Australia, Aclara, MP's there, Ionic Rare Earths, spoke with them the other day. So, Ionic, remember, is creating the oxide, they're shipping the material to be refined elsewhere, right? So, and they're focusing on recycling. That's another area to focus on. So as we make all of these rankings available, and all of them will be under subscription, I think we'll be doing a great service for those investors that are interested in this topic. And we should let everybody know that the Congressional Subcommittee on the Communist Chinese Party just contacted us and asked us to talk with them about what we know, which I thought was, pretty cool.
Right. Yeah, that was cool.
So, I think I don't want to get too much into what's going on with some of these companies, but suffice it to say, we provide a lot of information on our rankings. Now, we're not sharing right now the processing rankings. We've finished those, and those are going to go live with magnet rankings, recycling, and the upstream rankings under a subscription in another month or two. So we can fund the continuous disruptive innovation that we're doing here.
Absolutely.
But I think just to say, countries are gearing up. The U.S. by far has under Trump's leadership has stepped up the most now, putting money into major deals. Now, as we discussed, Australia recently has made $1 billion bet. They're supporting their infrastructure. Europe is sort of a little bit behind. They have a critical minerals initiative, but it's still more of a patchwork, I think, over there. It's not quite as intense as what we see happening over here in the United States. And there's other countries like Brazil that have initiatives, but thus far we haven't seen, the type of outrageous deal making that is happening under Trump in some of these other countries.
Which is good, right?
Very good. Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone's thinking about, they're doing just more than thinking. They're taking action that they can, as I think everyone's learning on the fly of what's what. And so I think it's a good thing that's going on. And,
absolutely.
And as we move off the topic of stocks, I just want to throw out my typical disclaimer, right? If you're interested in anything, by all means, please talk to your financial advisor and talk about what would be best for you in your portfolio. We are simply sharing our opinion of what we think is a good buy or not. So with that, Daniel, let's transition to some of the latest things that have gone on in the news that we've reported on. What would you say is high on your list of interesting?
Well, the Office of Strategic Capital loaned $150 million to MP Material for heavy rare earth processing. That's pretty impressive. Again, heavy rare earth are really hard to get. About 99% get processed in China. That's clearly MP is again taking on more responsibilities to try to get a handle on that. It'll take some time, some years, but basically that $150 million is meant to bolster the rare earth processing, rare earth separation capabilities, which really doesn't exist yet in the United States. I mean, there's some companies that will claim they can do it on a recycling basis on a small level. Yeah, I'm sure they can, but at scale, no. And Lynas has done some processing of heavy rare earth in Australia, but not a huge amount. Again, 99% plus of the heavy rare earths are refined in China. That means that we're dependent on China until we build up this. Everybody is. And as we try to educate people, that's not by accident. They have a whole integrated policy to make sure that we continue to be dependent, right? For as long as possible. Now, remember, their 30-year plan that we went through on one of our first podcasts, at some point they won't care. You remember why?
Because you can't catch up.
Well, yeah, part one is the rare earths. By the time we all catch up, it won't matter because they will have already executed on phase 2, which is making tons of money on those verticals like electric vehicles. And phase 3 is the digital currency controls. So by the time we catch up 5 years, 7 years from now, they probably won't care because they've moved on to what they've already stated as part of their plan anyway.
Yeah.
So that's why we have to accelerate if we want to disrupt that. You have to spend billions now. I mean, and I don't mean 1 or 2 billion. I mean tens of billions now.
Yeah, which is why I think there's a lot of urgency, and hopefully having a huge influx of cash. MP Materials has received all kinds of money that hopefully it's will enable them to move faster. But like you said, 5, 7 years down the road, like, well, that's a lot of time, and a lot can happen in that time frame. So
A lot can happen. Before we end today, I want to talk about our recruitment platform, our talent matching. Very important because you got to develop talent, right? Part of this issue is to have the necessary labor force that can help you fulfill, execute what we need to do. So that's something we should talk about. Other countries, I was going to bring up some of the news. Other countries like India has proposed a 4-pillar strategy to secure what they call mineral autonomy, and that includes rare earth elements. Remember, rare earth elements are separate. They're not critical minerals per se, but they fall under the same category. And their target is by 2035 to be independent. Again, based on what we know about the Chinese strategy, that's too late. They've already moved on. They don't care. Take it. By that point, they'll be controlling the digital currency. 2035 is 10 years from now.
yep, I mean it'll be good. I think it'll be
Dustin,
good that
remember what
they
China
have
is
that
doing.
independence, right?
Yeah. I mean, remember what China's doing right now. What are they focusing on? Patents. They're focusing on innovation, rare earth innovation downstream, materials, life sciences, defense. So what they're doing is they're innovating around research. They're spending billions of dollars on research, and they're patenting. For every one patent we do, they do 10. It used to be the opposite. And they're developing standards so that when we start coming out of this stone age that we're in right now, self-imposed stone age, they're going to sue us. They're going to say, "Hey, that's our patent. Hey, that's our patent," on the world courts. So, it's sort of ironic that, the stereotype is that, the West, US, we innovate and China copies, right? It's actually the opposite right now. When it comes to certain industries like rare earth supply chain, they've been spending 30 years working on this, and now they're working on the innovation and the standardization and the standards so that they can own the future. So we have to do two things. We have to catch up, and at the same time, we have to own the future.
Which seems really hard to do both at the same time.
Well, this is our challenge to Donald Trump. Our challenge to Donald Trump is it's not enough just to spend a few $1 billion and do a few deals and say, "See, we're doing some deals and we're going to catch up." No, you don't have the luxury. You have to catch up, and you have to outflank by innovating. So you have to spend double, and you have to do it smartly, because money by itself doesn't solve the problem. You really have to have a vision and a strategy, and that's where the industrial policy comes in, right? If you don't have that, you're sort of working in a piecemeal way, because your competitor does work that way, and they're well ahead of you, if that makes
Absolutely.
sense.
But it does make sense, but it's not just the Trump administration, right? Like, they are the ones that are moving and grooving on this issue and starting the ball rolling. But we just said a moment ago, right, that a lot of this can't be resolved for another 5, 7 years, which President Trump will have left office before some of this has even seen resolution. So it's a United States government. It's all Democrats and Republicans. They have to be on board with what's put into motion, because I also believe there's a scenario in which they just undo the whole thing, right?
Oh, they could easily. I mean, they've done it before. So, yeah, no, sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, I agree with you. And first of all, to give President Trump credit, I mean, he's the only one that's done anything, to be honest with you, really. I mean, there were some policies under Biden, but it was sleepy. And so I think he's the only one that's done anything. But what we're conveying to him, not that he's not doing great, he's done more than anybody else, but we understand how dire the situation is. We've done the homework. We know that China has a long-term plan that they've been executing, and that's their core livelihood, are these controls. So, we have a two-pronged problem. We have to catch up, but at the same time, we have to own the future. And, if the administration changes and there's a different priority and this slows down, forget about it. Forget about it.
Which would be truly unfortunate to just let it all go. And not just from, an urgency perspective, but the amount of money that businesses and organizations are currently pumping into the United States to create this stability, this lack of reliance on China. If it slows down and it just fizzles, how sad is that? Like, what a waste.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is why we need to pay particular attention to what's happening in the scientific world, because that's the other side of this, is owning the future. We need to be studying those patents they're putting together over there and understanding how, because what they're doing is they're using this innovation to produce like steel that's lighter and more flexible or to build air spacecraft or missiles or what have you. So that's really where their focus is. They want you to think we need to figure out how to mine more. That's the real war is downstream innovation. And a fundamental fork in the road will be this energy thing, like the green energy paradigm with solar, wind, this next generation energy. A lot of that depends on rare earths, but the U.S. has decided under Trump to go back to fossil fuels as a primary source. So coal, natural gas, nuclear, that's a whole nother topic we don't get into as much, but that similar problem in that the material and the processing still happens in other places mostly. It's an existential problem that, we dug deep into this, Dustin, and we've learned how lopsided this is. So again, it's good. It's great we're seeing what we're seeing. Now, there's some 232 action. There's a report that should be coming out any day now where hopefully Washington will, the Trump administration will have a sober account of where we're really at and recommend more proactive activity, right? We'll have to see. Our discussion with the folks that are the staff in the Congress in that subcommittee, they seem to think that they seem to agree with us that it's a dire situation. Would you agree with that?
I do agree. It is dire. I'd say any situation where you're held over the barrel, it's not a good position to be in.
It's not a good position. It's not a good position. And it's interesting, just quickly, the whole trading system we created after World War II. And I tend to be globally focused. I'm happy that our trading system has created so much prosperity around the world. I'm not really a nationalist per se. I mean, I'm a patriot, but I'm glad. Okay. But it got too one-sided. We just outsourced everything. And, that's really not China's fault. They're just taking care of their interests. It's our fault. Our political leadership, our corporate leadership, our academic leaders, they all had their heads up their asses. Excuse my French, but that's just the reality. And, the paradigm was global, trade, division of labor, and just, outsource that to someone else that could do it. But then what if all your missiles need this one input? What are you're just going to outsource that to what is a adversary? I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. And I agree. It's a byproduct of greed, right? Organizations, businesses, corporations, everyone is trying to increase their bottom line, their margins, by getting it done cheaper somewhere else. And we've talked about that many times before on this podcast, that it's a byproduct of our own making, and we are being forced to reconcile it.
It's
Much
but
much to the Trump administration trying to course correct for us. We're being forced to course correct, which I think is a good thing.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I think it also just highlights all that's been going on.
I would say I agree with you. It's greed, but it's also a faulty paradigm that, you can just count on adversarial countries for your critical inputs, for your production value chains and production. That economic motives will always align people in uniform direction. And that's not always true. And, when it comes to important inputs that you need for your society, you need to be able to have pathway to secure those inputs, right? It's very, very basic 101 stuff. And we have a lot of academics. There are layers in our society of people that are probably overpaid in academia, government, companies, who don't really do anything but sort of shuffle ideas. But that's fine if it's direct to the market and it is responsive to what urgent needs are there. But if it becomes abstracted, if it's abstracted many times over, you start to lose your way. And I think that's what happened over the last 30 years. And I think Trump is trying to address it. I gotta give him a lot of credit. It's the first time we've really seen someone in that office that's really trying to. I mean, I think Biden did some decent things with the CHIP Act. I think there was a lot of things. I don't think Biden gets the certain credit for things that he did do. But yeah, it's an urgent situation. Dustin, I there's some more news, but I would, if you're good, I'd like to just talk a little bit about what we're trying to do with talent matching and recruitment, because I think it's very important.
Yeah, let's transition gears. And I think that is probably a great topic to kind of end on here, because as we've been doing our podcast interviews with like Harriet Hagman, Congresswoman of Wyoming, other CEOs of businesses here in the United States, the number one thing that they've shared in common and what they've shared with us is there is a talent shortage. There isn't enough of the skilled labor to even do what we've been talking about here on this show, right? Is who can do it. And that's a whole nother hurdle to overcome, which brings us to how we're going to try to help the industry solve that problem. So go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, it's kind of really simple at its core. We don't have enough talent with metallurgists, chemists, process engineers, and so materials engineers. So we and the analysts and some of the labor that's behind all that, we need to develop that, and also we need to identify it, map it, and connect it most efficiently. And that's why the Rare Earth Exchanges platform, we're a platform, Dustin, what we're building, and it's taken off. It's becoming bigger than any of us. We've already seen this. It's exploded, the traffic and everything. So it's going to become a labor market where talent, with skills are identified and they're mapped and matched to companies, whether it's upstream, midstream, or downstream, so that, we can facilitate that labor market better, faster here in ex-China. So we're working on the United States, but also Europe, Australia, Japan, we have ties to. Heck, if we can figure out how to poach Chinese, we will. So, the idea here is, though, that, yeah, it's a little harder. They have controls. If you work in one of those facilities in China and you want to take your kids to Disneyland or Disney World in Florida, they're going to be checking in on you. So more to come on that, but we're building the infrastructure so that we can facilitate more efficient talent identification or development, even because we're going to work with universities and vocational schools as well. So really excited about that. And again, Rare Earth Exchanges is a platform. It's not only news and analysis and the forum, it's also these rankings, information for investors, because our other mission is facilitating retail investment into the supply chains in ex-China sphere. We're really excited about that. We'll have more on our website soon, but I think it's an important mission, the Rare Earth Exchanges.
Absolutely. I think it's a perfect addition to all the work that we're doing to help the rare earth industry grow and flourish outside of China. And it's a long road ahead. We know that, but we're trying to help do our part in not just talking about it, but also helping where we can. Daniel, anything else you want to share to kind of put everything into perspective and sign off with?
I want to share with investors that whoever bought MP Materials a few months ago has just made an enormous amount of money. That's not over. Now, we're not financial advisors here. We can't tell you what to buy or sell in terms of stock, but we're tracking these things carefully. We have these rankings. We want to help investors make the best possible decision. All of this could fizzle, no question. Political winds blow, maybe Trump goes and does a deal with China and they open up. Who knows, right? Anything's possible. But if this continues, there's going to be a lot of money made. So people should tell a friend, Start coming to rare earth exchanges. Pay attention to the rankings that we're doing, the news. We provide critical information. We're just not cheerleaders for anybody, other than the United States and other countries becoming more independent. And that's our mission. So pay attention to these stock prices and what's going on, because it's pretty significant.
Absolutely. If you like this episode, give us a like. If you don't want to miss a future episode, like the one coming up next week where we interview Mark Jensen from ReElement, American Resources Corp., subscribe to the channel. And with that, thank you, Daniel, for joining me on the show today to talk about what's going on in the industry. And we'll be back in a few weeks.
Thanks, Dustin.